Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The DOJ has not really been helpful to Capitol Hill.
Right. Well, so right now, my job is to deal with the documents that have been responsive to the Goodlatte subpoena. There's a lot of documents that are being reviewed. We need to do a better job of looking at those more quickly, addressing the redaction issues in those, and then getting them over to the committee.
Mm-hmm. What, do you believe that Congress has a constitutional right to oversight? And if you do, how is it possible that the DOJ is refusing to hand over these documents?
Yeah, and so look, to be clear, the DOJ is not refusing to hand over anything. And of course, Congress has, they have a right and an obligation to do their job, which includes oversight. I mean, what our job and what my job will be is to ensure that we have a process, a better process than we've had going forward so far, to get them the materials that they're entitled to, while at this time ensuring that the legal rights of individuals that are in those documents are protected. For instance, there might be grand jury material in some of those documents. We have a legal duty as prosecutors not to provide those materials, and Congress understands that. All of that said, we need to do better. We need to do much better.
Well, a couple of things. Just to answer this, the former chairman of the Oversight, Jason Chaffetz, says this: the relevant documents are all of the documents. If you are produced a subpoena, you comply with all of it. It's not optional. You don't get to hand pick this. So you don't get to hand pick it. Just hand them over.
Right. Well, and the key there is to produce the relevant documents. And I think there's maybe one misnomer that's out there. The number that's been thrown around is actually a much broader set. The 1.2 is a much broader set than documents that are actually related to the Clinton email investigation. And so that's one of the things we need to do.
And I understand the DOJ released another 3,000 to government congressional investigators, I think, on Monday. But what I've heard from one investigator is that most of the copies were useless because they are simply duplications of what they've already gotten in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to me. I've only been at this for a couple of days now. It's clear to me that we need to do a better job at getting them relevant material.
John, will you clarify? You said at the beginning of the interview, the 2 pages, the FISA warrant application, that's what everyone wants to see. They want to find out what reason the DOJ had to spy on the Trump campaign. And so those 2 documents are very important. But did you say that you're not overseeing that?
I'm not. That's being handled elsewhere.
All right. So will we be able to see those 2? Do you even know?
I don't know.
Okay.
So you're handling.
It's a serious question, and serious people in the Department of Justice will be addressing that today.
So you're handling the document production for the Goodlatte subpoena.
Exactly.
But here's a question: isn't there an inherent conflict with the people who are implicated in the documents, doing the redactions? I said this a moment ago, it's like somebody grading their own paper, because what we have seen in the past is some things were completely redacted, and then congressional investigators found out later, wait a minute, they were just protecting themselves, like that the FISA judge and Peter Strzok, their best friends, that was redacted when it got sent up to Capitol Hill.
Right. I mean, so I think it's one of the reasons why I'm here as an outsider, someone from outside of D.C., to come in here in order to look at the process, and in particular to look at the redactions and to make sure One, that there aren't any redactions based on embarrassment. That's not an appropriate reason, and it's never been an appropriate reason. They should get the materials, while at the same time ensuring that that certain material that lawfully should not be provided, things like grand jury material or ongoing investigations.
Are you the sole arbiter of what will be redacted and what would not? Are you going to bring anyone to look over your shoulder to agree with it, to wipe out any type of fear that you're not getting the whole story?
Right. Well, look, I'm going to have a team of people working with me to make sure we do a good job.
Are they
here.
the same people who have been doing it?
Some of the people will be the same, but it's going to be my responsibility to make sure that I'm comfortable with the team that's around me in order to ensure that we're getting the right materials.
Rod Rosenstein, who is Mueller's best friend, one of his closest friends, it appears that he's trying to protect people that are abusing power. What do you see what have you seen in the last few days since you've been appointed this position?
Yeah, I haven't seen that at all. I mean, look, I'm out here to do a job, in the Justice Department. We're doing our very best to get this right, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm out here.
All right, lastly, just, John, what is the problem? It's taken months. We've only got 1,000. We need 1.2 million. You just got there a few days ago. Tell everybody what the problem was.
Right. So look, I'm still trying to identify what all of the issues are there, and as I mentioned before, 1.2 million is kind of not the right as far as relevance. It's clear, though, that we can improve some of the processes along the way to streamline it a little bit more and to ensure that any bottlenecks in the process are removed so we can move these documents more quickly.
Well, could you stop by next week and just tell us, you will have had a week, figure out what the problems were, and tell us the progress being made so far?
Well, I'd be happy to talk with the folks here at the department in order to to talk with people in Congress and you all in order to make sure that we're keeping the American people up to date on what we're doing.
Well, people want to know that the Department of Justice is just and fair and not just protecting people who work.
That was your lucky day when you got appointed this position.
It is Thursday, the 12th of April of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, Bannon's back. The day of the alpha male has returned. Yeah, along with Sebastian Gorka, So, why haven't they stopped that guy at the border? You never know. Well, Bannon is back. He's advising Trump to do retroactive executive orders. So I guess if one were to follow that logic, one could retroactively overturn the Dred Scott decision. Or the decision that overturned the Dred Scott decision and give it back to the original Dred Scott decision. I guess you could retroactively reverse all of the penalties from the Teapot Dome scandal. Retroactively. Because you were that powerful. Oh, a Trump bro asked me how come I hate the leader of the free world so much. After we had this really, contentious argument about Trump, and I told my Trump bro that he's mistaken. I don't hate the leader of the free world. I actually believe that Angela Merkel is doing a stellar job. Looks like April Ryan is receiving death threats for simply asking a question. She gets these death threats quite often whenever she questions Donald Trump. Her question this time at the press conference to Sarah Huckabee Sanders was, is Trump considering stepping down? And she stated the reason she asked that question is because her sources say that that's what's been discussed with Trump in the Oval Office. And now she's getting death threats. Well, and that's also because she's black, and it's even worse if you're a black woman who questions Donnie Two-Scoop's status as the supposed leader of the free world. Yeah, right. They're setting up messaging already for the midterms, and I guess they might even call this book tour by James Comey their attack on James Comey as part of the messaging for the midterms. Donnie Two Scoops is calling the former FBI director Lion Comey. Okay. All right. Well, it's a little interesting. Kind of set up people to take a fall, and then, that's the patsy, right? Right? Well, when you're deconstructing the administrative state, there's going to be some casualties. And that's just the way it is. It's the way it is. Because, hey, Bannon is back. Oh, boy. The big salacious story is that I guess the National Enquirer was used as part of the fixer method. And apparently a doorman at one of Trump's properties was paid $30,000 by the National Enquirer for his story about Trump fathering a child with an employee somewhere in the Trump organization. And that $30,000 was paid to the doorman for his story, and he told his story, and they buried the story, never published it. It was hush money. But on the surface, I guess it wasn't hush money because he sold the rights to a story. And, hey, that's the way that is. So that I don't know. I guess that might violate Trump's prenup with Melania. So, and it may also be an explanation for why he's so hard on immigrants. What if these kids are trying to get back into the United States from, I don't know, the Ukraine, other places in Slovenia, maybe? You just never know. Oh, boy. Never Trumper Rick Wilson had begged reporters in the GOP to dig into Trump's hush payouts in 2016, but they all ignored him. Well, it wasn't just Rick Wilson begging the media to look in various things about Trump. And I think that is emblematic now of Stephanopoulos being shocked that James Comey called or compared Trump to a mob boss. As if no one is aware of Trump's real estate business in New York. Jeez. Okay, well, there's so much more out there, but we do have some stories that we have curated for you today, and I should get into them and let you know what they are. Well, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, starting off, the Department of Justice had to send a U.S. attorney to Fox and Friends so that he could explain to Trump through the TV machine how they review and redact documents when Congress requests them. Because they didn't get to that part in the crash course on American civics that the FSB gives to their useful idiots, dupes, and assets right there in the Kremlin, too. It might be an online course, but it's right there in the Kremlin. Then, on the rest of the menu, a second Republican quits Congress in a single day. You think it was only Paul Ryan. There was another guy that quit yesterday, too. And, let's see, neighbors of Trump-loving Sinclair boss David D. Smith say he's breaking restraining orders and making life miserable for everybody. And when they said everybody, they meant everybody in this town near Portland, Maine. But I think they've touched upon something more grand, and that is Sinclair Broadcasting is making life miserable for everybody. And the Department of Justice suddenly halts legal aid for detained immigrants facing deportation. After the break, then we'll move to the chef's table, where California police are very mad about a modest proposal on deadly force that they haven't even seen yet. And Scott Pruitt's idea to update an agency souvenir coin is to make it less about the EPA and more about Scott Pruitt. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page down there. Our roaring girl, Kelly Lincoln, does monitor that quite frequently during the day, and that is a good way to connect with Netroots Radio if you have any questions, concerns, requests, etc. To the leftish of the chat room link there at the bottom of our homepage are the Contribute Donate buttons. And thank you for your generosity. We're paying our bills, and we are unable to do that without you. So thank you very much. Do follow Netroots Radio on Twitter. We are at Netroots Radio. We're on Facebook, too, if you still want to do that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And do check out the Daily Coast Diary that I post about 10 minutes before showtime that has all the show notes and links and other entertaining minutiae for your perusal. So check that out. Podcasts. Yes, of course. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's see here. I wanted to just give a little update. It's still a bit early, but those folks who have been following the show know that yesterday morning we got back from the ER with my elderly mom, and they gave her some powerful antibiotics. And I think, like I said, it's still a little too early to tell, but I think she's these biotics are attending to the issues that she has, and but I also think just an attitude shift had occurred too, knowing what the problem is and that something's being done is always it's a calming influence. Yeah, so. But she seems a little bit better, and I can tell because, she wants to go out and do things beyond her ability. And, we all do it. We feel just a tad well, and then we want to go out and run a marathon. So I'm just trying to, come on, just give it a couple of days, then you can run your marathon, Mom. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get right into these stories. Yeah, everybody was focused in on Paul Ryan. Now, he's not actually quitting. He's going to serve out his term. But the Speaker of the House stepping down, and I got to tell you, it couldn't have happened to a more loathsome creature. That widow's peak, I think, says it all. And, oh, boy. So, and what havoc that Paul Ryan and his ilk has perpetuated upon our body politic, I like to say is immeasurable, but we can measure it, actually. And we can measure it by the fact that the 39th House Republican is now sprinting for the exit. That's right. Another House Republican joined House Speaker Paul Ryan in getting the hell out of Dodge. Representative Dennis Ross, a 4-term congressman who represents Florida's 15th congressional, informed his staff he was dropping his bid for another term. 8 years takes his time on you, said Ross in an interview. When you feel like a stranger in your hometown, it's time to say there's got to be an exit strategy at some point. What a whiner. Now, Ross is the 39th House Republican this cycle to announce his retirement rather than face the blue wave. And that's according to Daily Co's Elections, which is, by the way, cited by Matthew Chapman in Share Blue Media. And that's what this story I've lifted from here. Let's see, that number includes Representatives Jason Chaffetz of Utah, Trent Franks of Arizona, Tim Murphy of Pennsylvania, and Blake Fairchild of Texas, who ultimately decided to resign outright rather than serve the remainder of their terms. Now, just a reminder, Ryan is, he said he's going to serve out the remainder of his term, but in January, he's stepping down from the speakership. So who we're going to get? McCarthy? Scalise? We have to find out what Donnie Two Scoops wants now, don't we? Mm-hmm. The announcement is a disaster for the GOP, just as Ryan's retirement shifted his congressional district's rating in favor of Democrats. Yeah, Iron Stash. I really wanted to see Iron Stash kick Ryan's ass. Now, Ross's retirement could give Democrats a shot at his seat as well. Florida's 15th, which is northeast of Tampa and is centered in Lakeland, leans conservative, but not by much. Trump only carried the district by 10 points, which is far less than he did in some other seats Democrats have flipped this year. 7 Democrats have filed to run for the seat, including Navy veteran Andrew Learned and small business owner Phil Hornbeck. The only Republican left in their race, according to the Florida Secretary of State's office, as of Wednesday, is Loretta Lax Miller, a constitutionalist, meaning that she has no idea what the Constitution says. But she does have an abridged and abbreviated pocket-sized Constitution right over her heart. She carries it there in a special pocket. And it's so small that they had to condense it and abbreviate it to fit it in. And, they kicked out the part or edited out that one part about the well-regulated militia. We don't need that. Okay, so her website boasts about her desire to stop Pizzagate, Falafelgate, no matter what you call it. Oh, she's a conspiracy theorist and thinks there's a basement at Comet Pizza because she heard about it on InfoWars. Unless another Republican steps up to run quickly, the race might end up very lopsided. I gotta say also, Paul Ryan, his seat is now being commandeered by a white nationalist. Keep them coming, buddies. Keep them coming. Day by day, as incumbents bail and Democrats step up, Republican prospects of holding on to the House only get bleaker. The exit of Dennis Ross takes them a step closer to the risk of total wipeout. Next article up here is out of the Ross story by Brad Reed. Neighbors of David D. Smith, the executive chairman of the Trump-promoting Sinclair broadcast group, are accusing him of violating restraining orders they got placed against him while also generally making their lives miserable. Smith last year was held in contempt of court by Judge Lance Walker of Cumberland County Superior Court in Maine after he violated a previous restraining order that barred him from removing posts that were erected close to his neighbor's property at his second home, a $2.2 million house located just outside of Portland. Why was he removing posts and why was there a restraining order brought against him? Because there is a prescribed easement right along the property line of his property and his neighbor's property that people used to get to their properties and had for decades and decades and decades and decades. Because this is blue blood East Coast America, by the way, folks. And this rich guy thinks he can come in and go, easement? I don't believe in easements. Though he bought the property and it's all part of the title, he knew about it. It was no surprise. And a judge ruled against him, but as is wont of these special people who have been sent from God on high to show us the error of our ways, thinks that he doesn't have to follow that order now, does he? During the hearing, neighbor Leslie Fismer told the court that she felt intimidated by Smith and what she described as his flagrant disregard of a lawful court order. The judge ordered Smith to pay Fismer's legal fees and costs in his contempt ruling. In an interview with The Guardian, Smith said he was unaware of the restraining order placed against him when he removed the post, although he said that he believed the order was not legitimate, since the post was located on his property. In a prescribed easement, you fool. According to the neighbors, Smith also claimed ownership of a paved lane they all used as a shared right-of-way. Now, Smith began drilling holes in the road and installing cones that blocked the lane, according to the lawsuit, and he said the shared right-of-way actually ran through his neighbor's property instead. Put it over there. He's been unneighborly, a neighbor said. He's making us all miserable, and we wish he would just go away. And don't we all? Up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is an article out of Think Progress by E.A. Crunden. The Department of Justice will temporarily halt and review a program providing detained immigrants with legal advice and assistance, the latest move in a series of crackdowns on immigration and immigrant rights more broadly by the Trump administration. I gotta tell you, Donnie Two Scoops, when it says equal protection and due process for all, that's what it means. Not just who you think is a citizen, okay? Everybody. Anybody. If they're on American soil, and in some instances, even when they're not. Technically they would be on native soil, when it's even on foreign soil. I'm just saying, you don't have to be within the confines of the continental United States of America to enjoy the rights of the Constitution. I know they didn't teach you that in the American Civics course that you took through that online course the FSB gave you online. Okay? Just telling you. The Justice Department established the Legal Orientation Program in 2012 and has saved the government almost $18 million a year and offered a cost-effective and efficient way to promote due process. Now, the reason for halting this is to do a review on the program because the Trump administration says it's a waste of money. Which what they're really saying is that why are these brown people getting legal advice so they can go to court to fight against my whim? God. So executive director of the National Immigrant Justice Center, Mary Meg McCarthy, whose organization works with this program, slammed the Justice Department's decision. This program is a lifeline for the more than 40,000 immigrants who face complex deportation proceedings from remote detention facilities every day. Terminating this program and the help desk program is a deliberate attempt to eliminate due process from the deportation process. Indeed, and that's what they're trying to do. Now, this group has tangled with government on immigration issues before. DHS Office of Refugee Resettlement warned the organization not to inform undocumented minors about the right to an abortion. Scott Lloyd, ORR's director, has made headlines in recent months for his effort to stop undocumented pregnant minors from obtaining abortions, which spurred legal action by the ACLU. And Human Health Services later said the government's instructions to the organization, Vera, were a miscommunication. Oh, really? You just want to take rights away from people. That's what you want to do. Let's get to our break. We'll come back and go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that have been curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. So here's the gamble. $20 guaranteed, or a 50-50 chance of winning $60. Which would you choose? The answer might actually be evident in a brain scan, according to a study in which researchers posed actual terms like that to 108 young adults, and the stakes were real. The initial choice and then the outcome, if they picked the bet, determined how much they'd walk away with after the study. The research is in the journal Neuron.
It does work out in our favor that people are risk-averse because it means that, on average, we're going to be paying people less than we would otherwise.
Joe Cable, a psychologist and neuroscientist at the University of Pennsylvania. After he and his team recorded the subject's appetite for risk, they scanned their brains using various techniques that visualize anatomy and real-time activity. And they found that individuals who were willing to throw the sure thing $20 away for the chance of a higher payout were also more likely to have larger amygdalas. That's a region associated with processing fear and weighing risk versus reward. They also saw in the gamblers' brains more synchronized activity between the amygdala and another region, called the medial prefrontal cortex. But there were fewer physical white matter connections between those two regions, which might seem paradoxical.
Sort of a first pass intuition, you might expect, well, shouldn't these two be going together?
But Cable explains that even though you start out life with lots of those white matter connections, they tend to get trimmed and refined during development. So fewer physical connections between regions could actually indicate a more mature, more developed synchronization of activity between them.
It's possible that within the population that we see of healthy young adults, a more pruned structural connection between the amygdala and the medial prefrontal cortex is a sign of a more developed connection and one that might be more effective or efficient and thus lead to greater communication between the two areas.
This type of scanning to predict behavior is in its infancy now. But down the line,
I can imagine it being used to help steer people to what the right place to put their money is when they're investing.
And the study also hints at the fact that brain scans might reveal a lot more about your attitudes and your behavior than you might think. It's a good thing to keep in mind. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Welcome to 60-Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Before he reached the age of 16, George Washington wrote down 110 rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. Scholars believed he copied these rules as a writing exercise, and many writers have cited the rules of civility as helping to form Washington's character at an early age. The rules have their origin in a French Jesuit text from 1595. An English adaptation of the text had been used in England for many years. This made it to Virginia, where it was adapted and simplified, and finally used as a writing exercise by the young Washington. The original is at the Library of Congress. You can find the entire text online, but here are some excerpts. First, every action done in company ought to be with some sign of respect to those who are present. Sixth, sleep not when others speak. Sit not when others stand. Speak not when you should hold your peace. Walk not on when others stop. 19th. Let your countenance be pleasant, but in serious matters, somewhat grave. 22nd. Shew not yourself glad at the misfortune of another, though he were your enemy. 54th. Play not the peacock, looking everywhere about you, to see if you be well decked, if your shoes fit well, if your stockings sit neatly, and clothes handsomely. 56th. Associate yourself with men of good quality if you esteem your own reputation, for 'tis better to be alone than in bad company. 73rd. Think before you speak. Pronounce not imperfectly nor Bring out your words too hastily, but orderly and distinctly. 82nd. Undertake not what you cannot perform, but be careful to keep your promise. 89th. Speak not evil of the absent, for it is unjust. 91st. Make no show of taking great delight in your victuals. Feed not with greediness. Cut your bread with a knife. Lean not on the table, neither find fault with what you eat. 109th. Let your recreations be manful, not sinful. 110th. Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience. That's all for today's podcast, 60-Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Question: what do you get when you combine ignorance, imperiousness, and incompetence? Answer: Betsy DeVos. She's Donald Trump's multi-billionaire education secretary who hates public education and loves the plutocratic idea of corporate rule over democracy. DeVos is so bad that she's winning the contest for worst member of Donald Trump's cabinet, a little like winning the title of ugliest toad in the swamp. She's been a shameless shill for one of the ugliest parts of the financial services industry, the Wall Street-backed network of for-profit colleges, rip-off lenders, and ruthless collection agencies. Some 5 million students, largely single moms, veterans, and other low-income people, have been forced to default on their student loan debt and have had their credit ratings and job improvement prospects destroyed by this profiteering private education system that DeVos carelessly promotes. Her latest favor for the industry was to assert unilaterally that her agency can preempt any state laws designed to stop the blatant lies and abuses of this predatory network of corporate education. Her bureaucratic claim is that state efforts to protect student borrowers undermines, quote, uniform administration of student loans. In her shriveled world of laissez-faire land values, you see, the uniform gouging of students trumps such basic human values as economic fairness and social justice. This is Jim Hightower saying, heavens to Betsy, what's wrong with this lady? Our nation's student loan debt has ballooned to $1.4 trillion, threatening to blow another big hole in our economy. Yet she's stupidly conspiring in her department's back rooms with Wall Street's fast-buck educational exploiters to enrich them at the expense of students, taxpayers, and the public interest. DeVos is the one who needs an education, both in economics and ethics.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Wednesday, April 11th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger.
We stand with Lula.
We stand with Lula. That is the rallying cry spreading through the international labor movement in support of Brazil's former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula, as he is known, was imprisoned last Saturday, April 7th, after a 2-day standoff that saw him take refuge in the Metal Workers Union headquarters in Sao Paulo. Support for Lula was organized by CUT, Brazil's largest labor federation. The building is where Lula began his career as a trade unionist. Thousands set up a human shield around the building in an attempt to stop the police from arresting him. Lula addressed his supporters saying he would leave the Metal Workers Building and surrender himself to the authorities. He said, "No, I am not hiding. I am going to prison to see their faces so they know I am not afraid, so they know that I am not going to run away, and so they know I am going to prove my innocence. They need to know that." In a judicial process many have declared unfair, Lula was found guilty last year of accepting bribes from construction companies. He has always denied the allegations. After surrendering to police, the 72-year-old was taken to prison to start serving a 12-year sentence for corruption. Lula was Brazil's president from 2003 to 2011. Because of term limits, he was not eligible to run for a third consecutive term. Just recently, once again eligible, he has been running for president and was high in the polls for the October election. His jailing is seen as an attempt by the country's right wing to stop him from ever becoming president again. One of the labor leaders urging support for Lula is Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the global body which represents national labor centers such as the Ghana Trades Union Congress.
What's happened in Brazil is a travesty of justice. It's the breakdown of law and order and a fundamental attack on democracy. When you look at the influence of the media determined to jail an innocent man in order to stop him running for president, this is simply wrong. The trade union movement, our members around the world stand with you, Lula, with the CUT, with the unions in Brazil, with civil society, for justice, for an end to this travesty, for the right for democratic process. We will globalise this protest. We stand with Lula.
Ms. Burrow's call for support for Lula has been echoed by the global unions. David Edwards, the General Secretary of Education International, urged Brazil to respect democracy and denounced the long-standing campaign of political harassment and the glaring lack of evidence. Rosa Pavanelli, General Secretary of Public Services International, said, "The imprisonment of Lula at this precise moment serves an agenda that goes against all the social achievements that Brazil has reached in recent years. An election without Lula," she said, "would be a fraud." The General Secretary of the International Transport Workers Federation, Stephen Cotton, told the media that the ITF stands in absolute solidarity with their Brazilian comrades against this injustice and flagrant disregard for due democratic and legal process. Global Union General Secretary Philip Jennings said, "Lula's imprisonment is a travesty of justice, and we call for him to be set free." Referring to an earlier gunfire attack on Lula's campaign bus, the General Secretary of Industrial, Walter Sanchez, said, "We call on the Brazilian authorities to investigate and punish the perpetrators of these criminal attacks, and to ensure normalcy and peace in the exercise of the political process so that Brazil can resume a democratic coexistence." And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Hey, no Old Bay in this dish, okay? That's for another region and another time. All right. Well, now that you're comfortably ensconced at the chef's table, let's take a look at weather from around the world, and we always begin along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees, a little cooler. And I got the strawberries in the ground. I told you I planted my my baby reds and my yellow Yukon potatoes. Do not destroy my crops, let alone my fruit trees. How dare you? And so we will be much cooler. It looks like we're only going to be in the low 50s. An overnight low hovering, I'm hoping that's in the low 40s where I'm at, though they say it's going to be in the upper 30s, which means it could be in the lower 30s. Do not freeze my crops. Please don't. And so, yeah, tonight we'll have a low of upper 30s to high or low 40s, hopefully. Right now, winds are out of the southwest at a negligible 1 mile per hour. It is raining, and it will rain for the rest of the day. It looks like we're going to get another 1/4 inch and should be tapering off tomorrow. Winds will be out of the west-southwest later today at 10 to 20 miles per hour, and then out of the southwest later on tonight at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And so we do have more rain coming in, though it looks like we might get hours of drying periods. Let's only hope. Air pressure right now is holding at 30.03 inches. Visibility is down to 3 miles. Air quality is good at 10 parts per million, and I'll take that. And humidity is 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these personal weather stations that they purchased somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. London is currently 52 with haze. Paris is 58 and cloudy. Roma is 58 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 51 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 62 and fair. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 61 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 77 and clear. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and sunny. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world in a very patronizing, localized accent for each region. How dare I patronize? And weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal weather stations that they purchased somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Okay, first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is by Alan Pike out of Think Progress. What, to a police officer, is the difference between holding them accountable and second-guessing them? The answer may have more to do with feeling included than any substantive distinctions, judging by the law enforcement backlash against proposed reforms to deadly force statutes in California. New legislation, provided in draft form to Think Progress by lead author Assembly member Dr. Shirley Weber, Democrat, would make substantial changes to how the state distinguishes between legitimate and illegitimate uses of deadly force on duty. Police officers from around the state called a press conference on Monday to sound off against the bill, which Weber and co-sponsors announced a week earlier but have not yet formally filed with legislature staff. The law enforcement critics asserted that the bill is a drastic shift from the reasonable officer standard of evaluating use of deadly force. Kill first, ask questions later. It's always cheaper to kill somebody than to wound them. Holding us to an unreasonable standard, said David Honda, chief of police in Watsonville, that measures in hindsight a decision that is made during an emergency or critical incident will only hurt the communities we serve. But that doesn't seem quite right. From a closer look at the draft bill, the changes on their face seem bland. Notwithstanding any other law, an officer may use deadly force only when such force is necessary to prevent imminent and serious bodily injury or death to the officer or a third party. The draft language reads, while ostensibly requiring all other tactical options to be exhausted or impractical before a cop can shoot someone. The bill's definition of necessary replicates the same old judicial standards. If, given the totality of the circumstances, a reasonable officer would conclude that there was no reasonable alternative to the use of deadly force, then the force is legitimate under the proposal. Now, this is not a recipe for second-guessing cops in some grandly new fashion, just a shoring up and a clarification of the same limitations on hindsight that already apply to the criminal justice system, if not in courts of public opinion. A society that gives police the power to kill must have some process for evaluating how that power gets used, and accountability mechanisms for police today often serve to undermine rather than shore up public trust, an essential tool of law enforcement. But law enforcement isn't about the community coming to respect law enforcement. Law enforcement now is all about compliance. If you don't comply, you're dead. And even if you're black or brown, when you do comply, you may be ending up dead anyway. Shoot first, kill, ask questions later. It's always cheaper to kill someone than to wound them. If the bill creates new obligations for police at all, and arguably it does not, thanks to the retention of the hypothetical analysis of a reasonable officer in the same circumstances, they are limited, contingent on practicality, and consistent with existing best practices policies for law enforcement, such as de-escalation training. I got to tell you, when you're hopped up on steroids and you've been taught to not only be fearful but angry at the same time, do you think de-escalation is going to be part of the protocol? I don't think so. And I would think that if you get to carry a gun and a badge, maybe you should be peeing in a jar. Monthly, maybe. Well, police, nonetheless, were quick to portray the package as foolhardily meddling by naive hands, the kind of feel-good policy only someone who's never stood in harm's way would support. In blasting the bill, the police representatives at times stooped to rank hyperbole to vilify the proposal. Well, the new proposal's emphasis on de-escalation and the necessity of deadly force would change the ingredients the officers have to factor into that rapid decision-making under process, but it wouldn't force them to perform some kind of brand new process. Of course, I guess when you've got a muscle memory of shoot first, ask questions later, it's always cheaper to kill someone than to wound them. That muscle memory has to be reprogrammed, I would think. And then it seems new again, doesn't it? What happened to the part where you apprehended the suspect, even when they had a gun or a knife and they were coming at you? Which reminds me, there's this rule that if somebody has a knife and they're 25 feet away from you, the time it takes you to pull your gun out of your holster, yell, stop police a couple of times, and get in a position for defense with your gun, the attacker could span that distance. Yet, no one talks about the gun that's already out of the cop's holster, and they're bearing down on the knife-wielding, mentally diminished and incapacitated individual waving a knife around. And they're 25 feet away or 30 feet away or 40 feet away, but they've already got their gun out of their holster with their finger on the trigger, laser-sighted red dot right there, center mass. They don't factor in that part. So don't shoot the knife-wielding suspect in the foot or the leg. Shoot them center mass, kill their ass, ask questions later. It's always cheaper to kill a suspect than to wound them.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
All right, finishing up here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is an article out of Talking Points Memo by Caitlin McLean. Now, this is from a much longer piece out of the New York Times that I have linked, so go read that. During his first few months as EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt proposed removing the EPA's logo of a flower from the agency's souvenir coin. Why? Because he said it looked like a pot leaf. Okay. Pruitt offered a few different replacements for the logo. He suggested using the image of a buffalo, a symbol of his state, Oklahoma, and at one point pitched using a Bible verse on the coin. He also suggested using the Great Seal of the United States on the challenge coin, a keepsake typically given as gifts to agency employees or guests. These coins represent the agency, a spokesperson told the New York Times, but Pruitt wanted his coin to be bigger than everyone else's, and he wanted it in a way that represented him. I'm sorry, this fellow is not a spokesperson, but a former EPA official by the name of Ron Slotnick, and two other EPA officials unnamed. So there, you got your three sources. There you go. Well, EPA spokesman Jahan Wilcox said the agency never ordered the new challenge coins. The coin currently features the agency's logo, a flower with 4 leaves, a design Pruitt complained looked like a pot leaf. Staff worried that removing the logo would break protocol and the changes would cost too much. Well, that's not an issue for Pruitt. Come on. The more you spend, the merrier. Pretty soon, we're going to deconstruct the administrative state. We won't be able to do this. Now, Pruitt has come under fire for his spending habits. He is protected by a large security detail, took several first-class flights, and also faces scrutiny for the condo room he rented from a lobbyist. Well, that's only the least of it. Okay, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but we'll be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the spirit of life. Oh, yes. And but do stay tuned for continuing coverage on Netroots Radio through our live feeds, and that'll keep you up to date. And if perchance Mueller gets fired, we will go live here with a quite extensive panel of guests from the blogosphere, and we'll walk you through it for however long it takes. But until then, stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme aux langues de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.